Hey there and welcome back to another Rings of Power video. And finally, I've managed to work my way through the season. Only a couple of weeks too late, and now I've reached the finale of the show, the one that ties everything together, and has a couple of pretty big character reveals, although by this point in the show I think that almost everybody's figured out the identity of Sauron, and honestly the identity of the Stranger as well, so yeah, wasn't exactly a big shock. But with all that being said, let's jump into the review for the final episode of Season 1 Rings of Power, Episode 8, Alloyed. So anyway, we start off with Gandalf's journey through Greenwood the Great, alone, in the mud, in the rain. Pretty depressing all things considered. And this whole scene really does make me quite salty about how cold Nori became to him towards the end of their journey together. The dude was an absolute stallion. He carried their cart for them, he saved them from getting eaten by wolves, he rejuvenated their grove after it was ruined by the eruption of Mount Doom, and yet he got banished like it meant nothing to them at all. Trash friends. And then on top of that, she even told the obviously evil people where to find him. So harsh. Anyway, he notices somebody watching him, and when he goes to follow, he trips and drops his apple. And since he loves that apple, as it's the last kind thing Nori did for him, he really wants it back. Plus, he also doesn't have any other food. But too bad, because the mysterious cloaked figure steals it, and so he has to give chase deeper and deeper into the woods, only for the figure to reveal themselves as Nori. Or rather, one of the creepy cultists, glamoured to look like Nori. And then the other two appear, and they all proclaim that he is Sauron. And obviously, he is not Sauron, simply from this scene alone, as this sort of reveal would clearly go better later in the episode. And it's being done now as an intentional misdirect to try and throw people off the scent for the big reveal later. Because obviously the writers knew from the get-go that Halbrand was going to look sus this episode, so they wanted to try and muddle the scent. And speaking of Halbrand, he and Galadriel arrive in Eregion after 6 days non-stop riding. Sure, okay, magic horses I guess. And also, yeah, he's Sauron and is probably pretending, right? Like, he can't actually be that badly wounded, can he? This has to be a trick, because either way, how the hell would it not be sus that he hasn't got like blood poisoning or something by now? How's he even still conscious? How does she believe this shit? Regardless, everybody's rightfully shocked to see Galadriel, whom they thought was in the Undying Lands, and she arrives just in time to interrupt a discussion between Elrond and Celebrimbor, where Elrond tells him they need to prepare to leave Middle-earth, and Celebrimbor tries to figure out how to use the small scrap of mithril to create something to save their people. I wonder how he's gonna do that. If only they could turn it into magic jewellery. Anyway, whilst the elves try to heal Halbrand, Galadriel and Elrond rekindle their friendship and express their own doubts about the path they've walked, before we see Halbrand enter Sauron manipulation mode as soon as he gets a moment alone with Celebrimbor. He enters his workshop, pretends he's all sickly looking for Galadriel, and then he talks about Celebrimbor and how impressive he is, presenting him as a legend, all the while pretending like he doesn't know he's talking to that very same elf. He expresses interest in the gemstones that would be used with the mithril to save the elves, whilst also giving Celebrimbor hope for being able to complete his project, by suggesting experimenting with various different alloys to stretch out the mithril and enhance its qualities. And all under the guise of repaying him for healing him. As a gift. Yeah. If there was any doubt about it, after this scene, it was all gone. I mean, being able to teach an elven smith new techniques, especially a true master like Celebrimbor, it seems like a very Sauron thing to do. And honestly though, I do wish we'd kind of just stayed with this storyline for a while more. I really don't give a shit about what's going on in Numenor now. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the king's dying, alright. But none of the main Numenorian characters are there. Just the obvious villain guy who's seeking immortality for mankind, and Elendil's daughter, who's granted special one-on-one access to the dying king to draft a design for his tomb, just like many others are going to do before his death. So basically, they're all having a contest like it's a government-run art competition that your teacher's forcing you to enter at school. But yeah, the dude mistakes her for his daughter, and then takes her to see the Palantir, where she's presumably going to have a vision of what's to come if they don't do as he says, and restore the old ways of Numenor. So I'd guess she's going to have a more important role going forward, and potentially be a driving force behind her father getting back on the metaphorical horse. After all, after Isildur's death, it seems like the guy's going to want to stay in Numenor and not listen to the Queen anymore, I'd think. He'd want to return to those isolationist principles as opposed to go back and fight. But if his daughter now has secret knowledge, that might spur him on. And honestly might even set up him and the faithful leaving Numenor before the sinking. And then, in the very next scene, King Gil-galad once again arrives to simply rain on everybody's parade, ruin their day, and tell them to pack up and leave, yelling at them about how they have run out of time, scolding them for bothering to hope, scoffing at the suggestion of one item being used to help the elves and being wielded by just one person, and also scoffing at the concept of trusting the word of a low man. Honestly, the dude's a bit of a dick, but he is right about both creating a single magical item owned by one person, and honestly about trusting Halbrand, who in the end turns out to be Sauron. And then this is where Galadriel has her own oh shit moment, as she hears Celebrimbor recite the words that Adar said Sauron was attempting to do before they battled. And of course, this in turn makes her very deeply suspicious, as the only person who heard those words would have been Halbrand. And so off she goes to get the lineages of the Southlands, whilst Elrond manages to convince Gil-galad to give them 3 weeks to make this object. During which time, Halbrand gets very close with Celebrimbor and really starts to help him with the development of the rings. Then there's a very eerie scene where Halbrand talks to Galadriel and tells her that all of this is because of her, that he'd given up hope and was resigned to his own death, but that she'd saved him and gave him a new sense of purpose, inspired him to push to greater heights and to restore himself, and that he's never going to forget that fact, and he's going to ensure that nobody else forgets it either. So, at first glance, this is a kind thank you, but then when you look deeper, it's almost a veiled threat. Everybody's going to know that she's the reason that Sauron rose again. And it's going to be awkward when she has to explain herself to the king during season 2, I reckon. And so anyway, immediately after this, they once again try to throw you off the scent by having the cultists tell Gandalf that he is Sauron, before they knock him out and set a trap for the Harfoots, whom they've seemingly noticed sneaking up on them. They turn one of the cultists into a fake Gandalf, which lets them seemingly kill Shattuck, and they take Nori hostage. But Nori's mum wakes up the real Gandalf and, yeah, they all start to fight. And Shattuck is apparently not dead, and he appears and stabs one in the foot with a knife that he had in turn been stabbed with, whilst Gandalf gets tossed around by one of the cultists. Another of the cultists is pelted by rocks, and responds by trying to incinerate the Harfoots, who are in turn saved by Nori, who gives Gandalf the cultist staff, which allows him to turn them into moths, killing them, and in turn destroying the evil artifact. But not before they call him an Istari, a wizard. So yeah, it's now very clear that this dude is 1000% Gandalf. And hey, now he can even talk normally, so that's nice. But yeah, this scene, it was okay. It felt very plot armory though. Like the cultists had to go out of their way not to kill the Harfoots except the old man. Like, Poppy literally gets pinned to a tree with knives. Why not just kill her? Well, at least Gandalf was pretty epic in this scene, I suppose. And yeah, then Mr. Burrows dies off screen, and that's a shame, but at the same time, it was also very obvious that it was going to happen. And on top of that, did anyone else find those villains very anticlimactic? Like, from the trailers, I thought they were going to be a little bit more impressive. Guess not. We then move on to wrap up the story for Elendil and the Queen Regent for the season, showing them having a bit of a bonding moment, talking about loss and the price that one has to pay to walk the righteous path. And for a moment, I thought, are they actually doing a romance story here? Although on a second watch, it very much had a Friends vibe, a bromance vibe. Two friends banding together to work through their losses. And I'm honestly kind of intrigued to see where things go from here, to be honest. Anyway though, the king's dead, and her cousin is for sure going to launch a coup very soon. I wonder if they're going to do the forced marriage part though. Probably not. I think they're just going to go for her being blind, and thus not being the right choice to lead the people. Plus, they've really gone out of their way to show that this dude is very popular with the common man, and I just think it makes the most sense given how they've structured the story and the characters so far. But then we get to the money scene, the revelation. And just to nail home that this dude is Sauron before we actually get the proper confirmation, we see that in their pursuit to work the mithril in their forge, a pair of blacksmith tongs have fused into the rock, much like was seen at Sauron's workshop in the north. Before Galadriel's servant guy brings her the lineage chart and she marches off to read it, with Halbrand looking on, probably realising the jig is up. Time to try and smooth talk his way into having her serving him. And it's of course revealed through her research that the last king of the Southlands died over 1,000 years before, without an heir. And that in all likelihood, he killed that very same king and took his crest. You know what? I kind of blame Arondir for all of this. The dude has been watching over the Southlands for years. How do they not know the line of kings is broken? This is what happens when you get complacent. Anyway, they then engage in a battle of wills where Sauron tries to corrupt her at every turn. First by conjuring a creepy image of one of her dead brothers, and then just straight up confronting her on the raft they first met on, asking her to join him and rule Middle-earth alongside him, as his queen. Together, he believes they can restore order to Middle-earth and heal the land, showing her an image of what they could be, and revealing that in his eyes, this is how he earns his redemption. his forgiveness from the higher power. And I really liked this. It shows that he isn't just some deranged evil for the sake of evil character, but he's just delusional. He honestly thinks that this is the right path forward to fix what's been broken. And this scene, it was very epic. And obviously she doesn't join him and they ended as enemies, but you can see that it is painful for both of them to realize they have to let go of that friendship. That they're going to be foes forevermore after this. And the only thing I don't really understand is why he doesn't just straight up kill her now. I feel like it doesn't make sense for him to spare her after he's already defeated her. Why doesn't he finish the job and ensure his secret remains secret? Ugh. Anyway, Elrond pulls her out of the river, and she rushes off to warn Celebrimbor not to make the rings with Halbrand. But without revealing that he's Sauron, because, well, I guess it would make her look bad. But anyway, they go ahead and make the rings, because why not? Whilst also melting down her brother's dagger, as it has gold and silver from Valinor, the purest metal they can find, and in turn, what they need to help make the rings. Bad luck. That dagger did look really cool, so it is a bit of a shame. But then it's back to the Harfoots, where after Mr. Burrow's death, Nori has once again done a 180 on Gandalf, and now she's back to being best buds. And in fact, she wants to go wandering off trail with him, off to Rune, because he thinks that's where he's going to have to go to unlock the rest of his memories and figure out who he is and what his purpose in Middle-earth is. And so, after some heartfelt farewells, off they go into the big wide world, with even more confirmation that he's Gandalf when he tells her to always follow her nose, much like Gandalf says in Fellowship of the Ring to Merry in Moria. But then it's back to the Elven workshop, where they finish the construction of the 3 rings in a very satisfying jewel crafting montage. I could honestly watch a full episode of Elven Smiths making things. Reminds me of the great Word of Workshop behind the scenes clips from Lord of the Rings extended editions. Just perfection. Elrond also seems to figure out that Halbrand was full of shit by finding the scroll in the river, and so I guess that's going to come into play next season. And of course the 3 Elven rings, well, they look pretty awesome, not gonna lie. This whole scene was just pure epicness. It oozed epicness. Very much loved it. And then we finish off with Sauron making his way into Mordor, probably to start work on the 7 and the 9 rings, and of course the 1 ring, as well as killing Adar off and taking back his orcs. Not gonna lie, this show has had some ups and downs, but I do think it finished on a very high note. And I really like this final episode quite a lot. But with all that being said, these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? And the show, honestly. You like it, hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.